My name is Melissa Hartley. I'm 34 years old. And this past Easter, my father stood up at the dinner table and told 12 people that the house I grew up in, the house my mother died in, now belonged to my stepbrother. I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I just sat there with my hands in my lap while my stepmother smiled like she'd finally won something she'd been chasing for 25 years. Then my grandmother, 81 years old, arthritis in both hands, cane hooked over the back of her chair, pushed herself up from her seat at the far end of the table. She didn't raise her voice. She reached into the quilted bag she carries to every single family gathering, pulled out a manila folder that had clearly been folded and unfolded 100 times, and said, "Before your father finishes handing away something that was never his to give, I think it's time everyone in this room learned the truth about this house. Before I tell you what was in that folder, do me a favor, hit like on this video, but only if the story earns it, and drop the name of your hometown in the comments." I read every single one of them, and I love knowing where this channel reaches. If you're new here, welcome to Clam Stories Time, where every week we sit down with a real family, a real table, and the moment everything quiet finally becomes loud. Now let me take you back to February of this year, the week before Easter, when a phone call from my father set this whole thing in motion. I was in my kitchen in Dayton, Ohio, syringe feeding a 3-week-old kitten someone had dropped at my clinic, when my phone rang. Dad's name on the screen. He calls twice a year if I'm lucky, my birthday, if his wife reminds him, and whenever there's a family matter too big to text. "Melissa," he said, in that flat, rehearsed voice he gets when Vanessa has coached him beforehand. "Your stepmother and I want the whole family together this Easter. There's something we need to discuss. About the house." The house. My mother's house. The farmhouse on Maple Ridge Road where Diane Hartley hung sheer curtains in every window because she said morning light was a gift you shouldn't block. Where she taught me to can tomatoes on the back porch. Where she measured my height every summer against the pantry door frame with a red grease pencil, because regular pencil fades, baby, and I want proof forever. I hadn't set foot in that house since Christmas, when Vanessa seated me at the card table in the mudroom because, in her words, we ran out of real chairs. I was 34 years old, eating turkey next to the coat rack. "Grandma Ruth will be there too," Dad added, and that's the only reason I said yes. Not him. Not the house. My grandmother. "One more thing," he said, and his voice shifted, confused, almost apologetic. "Vanessa wants you to bring your birth certificate. Or your passport. Something official. She says it's for paperwork." I set down the bottle I was feeding the kitten with. "Paperwork. At Easter dinner?" "I don't know, honey. She just said to bring it." After we hung up, I sat on my kitchen floor with a half-asleep kitten in my lap for a long time. I'm a veterinarian. I spend my life reading bodies for what they won't say out loud, the limp that means something's wrong higher up the leg, the shallow breathing that means don't wait until tomorrow. And that phone call had every symptom of something about to collapse. I should tell you about the house first, because you need to understand what was actually on the table that Sunday. Not real estate. A whole childhood. The house, my mother, and the woman who replaced her. The house sits on 4 acres outside Yellow Springs, Ohio, a white 2-story farmhouse with a wraparound porch my grandfather Walter built board by board the year before my mother married my father. Green shutters. A tire swing that's been replaced 3 times but always hung from the same oak branch. My mother, Diane, loved that house the way some people love a person. She grew tomatoes and dahlias in raised beds along the fence line. She kept a sewing room upstairs that smelled like cedar and lavender sachets. And every June and every December, she'd stand me against the pantry door frame, press a red grease pencil flat against the top of my head, and draw a line. "That's how much you've grown," she'd say. "Twice a year, no cheating." She died when I was 9. Ovarian cancer, caught late because doctors kept telling a 29-year-old woman that her symptoms were probably stress. After she was gone, my father stopped being able to walk past the sewing room without closing the door fast, like he could shut the grief in with it. Vanessa Cole showed up 14 months later. She worked with my father at the insurance office. She brought casseroles. She reorganized his medicine cabinet and told him grief didn't have to mean chaos. Within 8 months she'd moved in. Within 16 months, they were married. She brought her son, Colin, who was 6 at the time, 3 years older than me. And slowly, so slowly I didn't notice it happening in real time, only in hindsight, the way you don't notice a house settling until the door won't close anymore, every trace of my mother started disappearing. Her sewing table went to a consignment shop. Her dahlias got dug up and replaced with a paver patio. Her wedding photo came down off the stairwell wall. But the grease pencil marks on the pantry door frame stayed. Vanessa painted the kitchen twice in 25 years and somehow never noticed them, tucked behind where the pantry door swings open. I used to go stand in front of them when I visited, just to remind myself she'd actually been real, that I hadn't imagined a whole mother. I drove the hour and a half from Dayton on Easter Sunday with 3 versions of a conversation rehearsed in my head. Polite. Firm. Nuclear. I was hoping for polite. I packed for nuclear. Pulling onto Maple Ridge Road, I counted cars in the gravel driveway. Colin's lifted black pickup, brand new, and I had no idea who was making those payments. Vanessa's Lexus. My father's old Buick. Grandma Ruth's tan Oldsmobile, parked crooked because at 81 she still refuses to let anyone valet park her. And 4 more cars I didn't recognize at all. Vanessa had packed the guest list. She wanted an audience. I understood exactly why about 90 minutes later. She met me at the door with one of her performance hugs, arms wide, voice pitched for the whole living room to hear. Melissa. It's been so long. We've missed you so much. Colin was on the couch, phone in hand. He glanced up, said hey, and went straight back to scrolling. I scanned the dining room walking through. The long table was set for 12 with Vanessa's good china, an Easter centerpiece of white lilies, and beside her own place setting, a manila folder thick with papers. Grandma Ruth sat in the wingback chair by the window, her quilted bag on her lap. She caught my hand as I passed. Sit by me tonight, she said quietly. Just that. Nothing else yet. From the kitchen I heard Vanessa murmur to my father, just loud enough to carry, you remember what you're supposed to say, right, Robert? He nodded. He didn't look at me. The announcement nobody saw coming. Vanessa had arranged seating the way a general positions troops before a battle she's already decided the outcome of. Colin sat at my father's right hand, the chair my mother used to occupy. I was placed at the far end, near the kitchen doorway, next to an empty seat nobody claimed. Grandma Ruth had been assigned somewhere in the middle, but she'd picked up her plate and silverware and relocated herself directly across from my father before Vanessa could say a word about it. Aunt Carol, my father's younger sister, caught my eye from 3 seats down and gave me a look I recognized from every family gathering since I was a teenager. Stay sharp. The food came out, glazed ham, scalloped potatoes, deviled eggs, rolls from the bakery in town. Vanessa carried the ham platter in herself, soaking up compliments before she'd even set it down. I was up at 5 this morning, she told my uncle's wife, Diane, yes, same name as my mother, a coincidence that always made the holidays a little stranger than they needed to be. Nobody appreciates how much work goes into this. Nobody mentioned my actual mother. Nobody ever does at that table. Her name hadn't been spoken in that dining room, as far as I know, since roughly 2001. 20 minutes into the meal, I watched Colin lean toward Vanessa and murmur something. I caught 2 words, now and already. Vanessa patted his hand the exact way you'd pat someone right before they walk on stage. Then my father stood up and tapped his water glass with a fork. The room went quiet the way a room goes quiet when everyone already senses something is wrong and is only waiting to be told what. I want to say something important, he started, and his voice cracked on the word important. He cleared his throat. Vanessa slid the manila folder toward him across the tablecloth. He glanced down at the top page, glanced at her, and she gave him the smallest nod, like a director cueing an actor who'd forgotten his line until that exact second. Vanessa and I have been talking about the future of this house for a long time, he said. And we've decided the fairest thing, the right thing for the family, is to transfer ownership to Colin. He said it fast, like ripping tape off skin, and sat back down before the words had even finished landing. The chair scraped against the hardwood. Silence filled the room the way water fills a bathtub, slow, then suddenly all the way up to the rim. My uncle set down his fork. Aunt Carol pressed her napkin to her mouth. Grandma Ruth's folded hands on the table went completely still. Colin leaned forward with a smug little half-smile. "I'm gonna take good care of the place," he said. "Keep it in the family." I looked at the stack of papers still sitting on the table in front of my father. From where I sat, 15 feet away, I couldn't read the fine print. But I could read the letterhead at the top. It wasn't a family trust document. It wasn't a lawyer's letterhead. It read, Ridgeview Land Partners, LLC. My stomach dropped through the floor. This wasn't about keeping the house in the family. This was about selling it. The pantry door frame. The porch my grandfather built board by board. The place where my mother grew dahlias before Vanessa ripped them out. All of it, sold to a development company, probably to be bulldozed into a subdivision or a strip mall or whatever companies with names like Ridgeview Land Partners build on top of other people's entire childhoods. Aunt Carol set down her knife slowly, deliberately, the way you'd set down evidence in a courtroom. I kept my own voice level. 34 years of practice. That house is where Mom lived, I said. Where she died. I don't agree with this. Colin tilted his head, that particular expression he gets when he's about to say something Vanessa clearly rehearsed with him in the mirror beforehand. Oh, come on, Melissa. He spread his hands out wide, performing for the whole table now. You were barely even around growing up anyway. The air went out of the room. 12 forks stopped moving at once. Colin wasn't finished. He leaned forward and looked me dead in the eye. Honestly? Ask your dad why this house was never really going to be yours in the first place. Silence again, but heavier this time. I could physically feel it pressing against my sternum. What is that supposed to mean? I asked. Colin's smile didn't waver. Everyone at this table has heard the stories, Melissa. About your mom. About who your real father might have been. I looked at my dad. He'd gone gray. He stared down at the tablecloth and did not lift his eyes. He did not tell Colin to stop talking. He did not say a single word in my defense. Vanessa sat perfectly still, her expression arranged carefully into something meant to pass for sympathy. But I caught the corner of her mouth twitch, just slightly, like a woman watching a play reach the scene she'd been waiting all night for. Grandma Ruth stands up. I need to pause the story right here for a second, because I know some of you watching have sat at a table exactly like that one, where someone weaponized your own dead mother's memory in front of a full room, and you had to decide in real time whether to flip the table or let the truth do the talking for you. If that's you, drop a comment right now, because what my grandmother did next is the entire reason I'm sitting here telling you this story. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button before we keep going. Trust me, you don't want to walk away in the middle of this one. Okay. Let's get back to that dinner table. My grandmother is 81 years old. She has arthritis in both hands so bad some mornings she can't twist open a jar of jam. Standing up from a low dining chair is not a small, casual thing for her body to do. So when Ruth Hartley pushes herself up out of a chair, everyone at that table understands she means it. She placed both palms flat on the tablecloth and stood. Then she reached into the quilted bag she carries to every family gathering, the same bag I'd seen her hold at Thanksgivings, at my nursing school graduation, where she sat in the back row because Vanessa had filled the family seats with Colin's fraternity friends. That bag went everywhere with her. And sometimes, late at night on her back porch drinking sweet tea, I'd watch her thumb quietly along the edge of something tucked inside it. A folder. Something she never once showed me. Now she pulled it out and set it on the tablecloth between the deviled eggs and the bread basket. "I have been carrying this folder for 25 years, she said. Her voice didn't shake. No drama in it at all, just the flat, patient tone of a woman who has waited a very long time to finally say something out loud. "Vanessa. This is between Robert and me." "No," my grandmother said, not raising her volume even a little. "This is between me and the truth has waited long enough." She turned toward Colin, holding his gaze steadily until his smirk started to falter under the weight of it. "You just told my granddaughter she was never really part of this family. You implied things about her mother that you don't have the first idea about." She paused, letting the words settle over all 12 faces at the table. Diane can't defend herself anymore. "So I will." She opened the folder. The first document inside was old, brittle at the folds, the way paper gets when it's been unfolded and refolded 100 times over a quarter-century. A deed. County recorder's seal embossed in the corner. "This is the deed to this house," Grandma Ruth said, laying it flat on the table with the care of someone setting flowers on a grave. "Recorded in 1988. It lists 2 owners. Walter Hartley and Ruth Hartley. Joint tenancy, right of survivorship." She let the legal language sit in the air for a moment before continuing. "When Walter passed in 2009, full ownership transferred automatically to me. I never signed this house over to Robert. I never signed it over to anyone." Vanessa's face went from flushed pink to something closer to bloodless white. That's old paperwork. Robert has lived in that house for 25 years. My Aunt Carol spoke up, calm and measured, the exact tone she uses when she's cross-examining a hostile witness at the courthouse where she works. "Living somewhere doesn't mean you own it, Vanessa. I pulled the county records myself 2 weeks ago, when Ruth called me. Ruth Hartley is the sole legal owner of this property. She always has been." Colin's chair scraped backward against the floor. "So this house isn't even Dad's? Stepdad's, I mean, whatever, it isn't his to give me?" "This house is mine," Grandma Ruth said simply. "It has been mine the entire time. And I will decide who stays in it." The second document. She reached back into the folder before anyone could fully absorb the first blow. "There's more," she said. "And this part concerns you specifically, Melissa." My chest tightened. Whatever came next, I understood I was about to learn something that had shaped my entire childhood without my knowledge. Grandma Ruth pulled out a second envelope, this one yellowed and soft at the creases, and set it beside the deed. "Before your mother passed, Diane came to see me alone one afternoon. She was already very sick by then, and she was terrified, not of dying, she told me, but of what would happen to you afterward, once she wasn't there anymore to protect you." She unfolded a single handwritten letter, my mother's looping cursive unmistakable even from where I sat. "Diane knew Robert would remarry eventually. She told me she wasn't angry about that, she wanted him to have someone. But she was afraid of what a new wife might do to you, to your place in this family, once she was gone and couldn't speak up for herself." My grandmother's voice caught, just barely, for the first time all evening. "So she asked me to hold something for her. Not legal paperwork exactly. A promise. She had her lawyer draft an amendment to Walter's and my estate plan, naming you, specifically you, Melissa, as the sole beneficiary of this house upon my death, regardless of whatever happened with Robert's marriage. She made me swear I'd protect that arrangement no matter what anyone said to me over the years. No matter how many times Robert or a future wife tried to convince me otherwise." The table had gone utterly silent. Even Colin had stopped moving. "For 25 years, Grandma Ruth continued, I have listened to comments. Little ones, dripped in slowly. Doesn't Melissa seem distant from this family? Isn't it strange how she never really bonded with Colin? Wouldn't it make more sense for the house to go to the child who actually grew up caring for you, Ruth, instead of the one who barely visits?" She looked directly at Vanessa now. Every single one of those comments was designed to erode a promise I made to a dying woman. And tonight, watching my own son stand up and try to hand this house to a boy who isn't even blood, while insulting the girl this house was always meant to protect, I decided I was done staying quiet to keep the peace. My father finally looked up. His eyes were wet. "Mom. I didn't know Diane came to you. I swear I didn't know any of that." "You didn't know," Grandma Ruth said, "because you stopped asking questions the moment it became easier not to. That's not the same thing as innocence, Robert." The developer folder gets opened. One of my cousins, sitting near the middle of the table, finally spoke up into the stunned silence. "Wait, what about that other folder? The one Vanessa had by her plate?" Vanessa's hand moved instinctively toward it, but Aunt Carol was faster. She's a paralegal by trade, calm and quick with paperwork the way some people are quick with a punchline, and she flipped the folder open without asking permission. She didn't need to. Vanessa had left it sitting on a shared family table in front of 12 witnesses. Inside was a letter of intent from Ridgeview Land Partners, LLC. The language was standard boilerplate, but the number at the bottom wasn't. An offer to purchase the house and the 4 acres of land for $612,000, nearly triple what the property had been worth 5 years earlier, before the county approved a rezoning for that stretch of road. "Colin Cole signed this," Aunt Carol said, turning the page so the whole table could see the signature line. "As anticipated owner." My uncle leaned forward, frowning. "Anticipated owner? He doesn't own anything yet." "Correct," Aunt Carol said. "Colin signed a letter of intent to sell a property he has no legal claim to, representing himself to a real estate development company as the future titleholder. That's not just embarrassing. That's misrepresentation, and depending on how far this went, it could be actionable." I stared at the number on that page. $612,000, split, presumably, between Vanessa and Colin, with maybe a small cut set aside to keep my father quiet and complicit. That was the price they'd assigned to my mother's dahlia beds, to the porch my grandfather built, to the grease pencil marks on the pantry door frame where a woman who'd been dead 25 years once measured how much her daughter had grown. $612,000, I said out loud, mostly to myself. "That's the number you put on my mother's memory." Colin opened his mouth and, for possibly the first time in his adult life, nothing rehearsed came out of it. Vanessa switched tactics the way a cornered animal changes direction, fast, desperate, all teeth. She stood up, arms spread wide, the universal posture of a woman auditioning for the role of martyr. "I raised you since you were 7 years old, Melissa. I cooked for you. I clothed you. I kept a roof over your head for 25 years, and this is how you repay me." My uncle's wife shifted uncomfortably in her seat. "Vanessa is very, very good at this. She has had 25 years of practice performing the devoted stepmother who held this family together when nobody else would." But Aunt Carol leaned forward, unbothered. Melissa put herself through veterinary school. She paid her own student loans. She bought her own car with money she earned. What exactly is she supposed to be so grateful for? Colin jumped in. "She wants the house. That's what this is really about." I set my napkin down on the table. "I don't want the house because of what it's worth, Colin. I want the truth, and the truth is sitting right there in front of everyone right now." The door frame. While the table erupted into overlapping arguments, my uncle demanding answers from Vanessa, Colin insisting the deal wasn't final, Aunt Carol calmly reading the fine print of the letter of intent out loud to anyone who'd listen, I quietly pushed my chair back and walked into the kitchen. The pantry door frame is white-painted pine, scuffed pale at the base from 25 years of foot traffic. I'd walked past it 1,000 times without really seeing it. I knelt down in front of it now. It was still there. Faded red grease pencil, but legible. Melissa, 3 feet 9 inches. June 1996. And beside the measurement, a small 5-pointed star, drawn by a woman who wanted her daughter to know that every single inch she grew was worth celebrating. I touched the marks with my fingertip. 30 years old, and the wax had held. Footsteps behind me, slow and deliberate, the particular rhythm of someone walking with a cane on a bad hip. Grandma Ruth rested her free hand on my shoulder. She didn't say anything at first. She just looked down at the same marks I was looking at. "I check every time I visit," she said quietly. "Just to make sure they're still there." I understood then, fully, what that quilted bag had really been for all those years. Not just the deed. Not just my mother's letter. A quiet, stubborn watch over this one small piece of hallway that Vanessa had never noticed enough to erase. "Grandma," I said. "I want to keep this house. Not for what it's worth. Because Mom is still here." She squeezed my shoulder. "I know, sweetheart. Your mother told me something before she passed, near the very end. She said, 'Ruth, keep this house safe for my girl. Don't let anyone erase her out of it.'" Grandma Ruth's eyes were wet now, finally, after holding steady through the entire dinner. I've been keeping that promise for 25 years. Tonight was just the night I finally got to say it out loud. We walked back into the dining room together. The arguing had settled into something quieter, more exhausted, the sound of a family realizing how much time had passed while a lie sat undisturbed at the center of every holiday table. I stood at the head of the table where my father had been standing earlier, and for the first time in my adult life, every single person at that table turned to actually look at me. "I want to say a few things clearly," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "First, this house belongs to my grandmother, and has for the last 25 years. That deed is right there on the table. Second, my mother arranged, before she died, for this house to eventually come to me. That letter is right there too. Third, Colin signed an agreement to sell a house he has never once owned, to a company that will very likely walk away the moment they learn that." I looked at my father. "I'm not angry that you remarried, Dad. I never was. I'm angry that for 25 years, you let someone else decide how much space I got to take up in my own family." He didn't answer. He just stared down at his hands. I looked at Vanessa last. "I won't call you my enemy. But I also won't sit at a card table in the mudroom again so you can seat your real family at the good table. That's over." Then I picked up my plate, carried it into the kitchen, and set it down beside the pantry door frame where my mother's grease pencil mark still held. What happened after? The guests filtered out that evening in twos and threes, and nobody lingered the way people usually do after Easter dinner. No second helpings. No coffee on the porch. Vanessa stood by the front door accepting stiff, silent goodbyes from people who couldn't quite meet her eyes. Aunt Carol sent the cease and desist letter to Ridgeview Land Partners that Wednesday. Their attorney responded within 48 hours, withdrawing the letter of intent entirely. No negotiation, no pushback. Colin had misrepresented himself as the property owner, and a development company with a reputation to protect wanted nothing to do with that kind of liability. His $612,000 deal evaporated in 2 days. The following week, my grandmother signed the paperwork that formally acknowledged what my mother had always intended: the house, upon Grandma Ruth's eventual passing, would come to me. But she didn't wait for that. She had the deed adjusted so my name was added immediately as co-owner, effective right away. "I'm not waiting until I'm gone to protect you," she told me over the phone. "I already waited 25 years too long for the rest of it." News travels through a small town the way it always does, through the church parking lot, the diner counter, the checkout line at the feed store. By the following weekend, most of Yellow Springs knew some version of what happened at that Easter dinner. Vanessa's friends from her book club quietly stopped inviting her. Deliberate deception spanning a quarter-century isn't the kind of thing casseroles fix, even in a town full of forgiving people. Colin ended up on more than one local contractor's informal blacklist after word got around about the misrepresented sale. He moved to Columbus a few months later, took a sales job, and as far as I know keeps mostly to himself now. My father called me 4 times that first week. I didn't pick up. Not out of cruelty, I just needed to sit with everything before I could speak to him without either of us performing something we didn't mean. 3 weeks after Easter, I drove out to the house alone on a Saturday morning while Vanessa and Colin were finishing moving their things out. Grandma Ruth had given them 2 weeks. They took 11 days. The house was quiet in the particular way a space feels quiet only after someone loud and heavy has finally left it, like the air itself had unclenched. I went straight to the kitchen and knelt at the pantry door frame. Melissa, 3 feet 9 inches. June 1996. The star, still there. In the hallway closet, behind a stack of old towels Vanessa had never bothered to sort through, I found a shoebox I'd never seen before. Inside it, my parents' wedding photo, my mother in a simple ivory dress with baby's breath pinned in her hair. A hospital photo of me, still in my newborn bracelet. And a slim, worn copy of The Runaway Bunny, with my mother's handwriting inside the cover. For Melissa. Read this whenever you feel far away from home. Love, Mom. Vanessa had packed my mother into a box and shoved it behind old towels for 25 years. I carried the box to the living room and set the wedding photo on the mantel, exactly where a framed photo of Vanessa and my father's 10th anniversary had been hanging that morning. My mother looked out into the room she'd loved, young and smiling, baby's breath in her hair. The table I set myself. A month after that Easter, I finally answered when my father called. We met at a diner off Route 68, neutral ground, coffee that tasted like it had been sitting on the burner since sometime in the previous decade. He was already in the booth when I arrived. He looked smaller than I remembered, thinner, like whatever scaffolding Vanessa had built around him for 25 years had finally been pulled away, and he wasn't sure yet how to stand up without it. "I'm sorry, Melissa," he said, before I'd even sat down. "I know that's not enough." "It isn't," I said. "But I want to hear you say it anyway." He wrapped both hands around his coffee mug. It started small. Little comments. "Doesn't Melissa seem so distant from Colin? Wouldn't it be easier on everyone if the house just stayed with the kid who's actually here every week?" I told myself I didn't believe any of it. But she said some version of it almost every single week for 25 years, and eventually it stopped sounding like an opinion and started sounding like a fact I'd just always known. "You could have asked Grandma," I said. "You could have asked me." I was afraid of the answer, he admitted. Afraid it would mean admitting how much I'd let slide by not paying attention. "You were more afraid of losing Vanessa's version of peace than you were of losing me," I said. He didn't argue. He just stared down into his coffee like the right words might be floating somewhere in it. "I can't undo 25 years, he finally said. "No," I agreed. "You can't. But if you actually want to know your daughter, your actual daughter, not the version Vanessa described to you at dinner every night, you start over from the beginning. You show up when you say you will. And you never again let anyone else tell you who I am." He nodded. It was small and it was shaky, but it was the first genuinely honest thing he'd done at a table in longer than I could remember. It's almost a year later now. I'm hosting Easter this year, at the house, my house, with my name properly on the deed beside my grandmother's. The table's set for 8, Grandma Ruth at the head, where she's earned her seat 100 times over. Aunt Carol. My uncle and his wife. 2 cousins. And an empty chair at the far end, set for my father, if he decides to come. He hasn't confirmed yet. But I mailed the invitation anyway, a real one, handwritten, because some doors you leave open even when you're not sure yet who's going to walk through them. Vanessa sent me one text message about 6 weeks after that Easter dinner. "I hope you're satisfied." I read it once and deleted it. I don't owe her a response. I don't owe her my anger either, honestly. Whatever comes next for her is hers to carry, not mine. Last night, I walked past the pantry door frame on my way to bed, the way I do most nights now. The grease pencil marks were still there. Melissa, 3 feet 9 inches. June 1996. The star my mother drew beside it, patient and small. I picked up a pencil from the kitchen counter, reached up, and drew a second star right next to hers. "My name is Melissa Hartley. I'm 34 years old." This is my house. And the woman who tried to erase my mother out of it is gone. But the woman who drew the stars, she's still right here. In the doorframe. In the dahlias I planted back along the fence line this spring. In every quiet Sunday dinner that finally feels like mine again. That's the story. And if you've ever sat at a table where your own family tried to make you feel like a guest in your own life, I want to hear about it. Tell me your boundary moment down in the comments. I read every single one, and I promise you, someone else watching needs to hear it just as much as I did. If this story meant something to you tonight, hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one, and share it with someone who needs a reminder that you don't need anyone's permission to belong in your own life. This has been Clam Stories time. I'll see you in the next one.